Have you ever felt like you were fighting a battle no one else really knew about? Well, today we're going to hear how God brought hope and freedom through Sherry Hoppen's story. Sherry, thanks for being here today.
Oh, Nancy, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I heard your journey starts with a severe hangover and you leaving for a 1,000-mile bike trip while you were detoxifying.
And, the story around that is that I worked for a nonprofit pregnancy center and we were raising money, doing a fundraiser. It was a bike ride from Michigan to Texas to a conference. And I was asked to be a part of this as kind of a kind of a backhanded invitation of maybe you should do the ride for life because I was kind of down and out. And this person knew what I was struggling with alcoholism. And I didn't want to say yes. I feel like I was coerced quite a bit into it, but I also was that person that was never going to lose face. And I said yes. And 51 days later, I left on this ride. And 3 days before we left, I gave in to a lot of fear and I started drinking, binge drinking. So the morning that we left, I was in rough shape. I was drinking up till the wee hours of the morning before we left. And
Wow.
I hid it from everybody. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. And I was hanging in there mile per mile, pedal stroke per pedal stroke because I was in bad shape, really bad shape.
Hmm. Hmm. So now, did the bike trip fix everything? But, how did you continue to drink?
Well, I didn't drink on that bike trip. And as the bike trip went along, I was surviving. In fact, after the first 3 days, it got better. It's simply a miracle. It's an act of God that I was able to even complete those first 3 days, even though I had trained and I was capable of doing it. All of that was a God thing because I was in no physical condition to even attempt to do the bike trip overall. But it was a place that God brought me to. And you would think that at this point, I say, yes, I got sober on that bike trip. And I came home and fell into my husband's arms and said, I will never drink again. But the truth is that yes, I did not drink on that bike trip. There was no option to, nor did I want to, because on that bike trip, I was with these wonderful Christian people and I was getting to know them and they were getting to know me. They knew nothing about what I was going through or about my past. And I could just be authentically me and real. And what I was finding out is that authentic, real Sherry she was okay. She didn't need alcohol to have fun and to let her humorous side come out. And I was enjoying myself, even though, don't get me wrong, 100 miles a day on a bike was hard. It was hard. It was uh, physically, emotionally, it was hard. But I was doing it sober. And every
Mm.
night I would lay in bed for the few minutes that I could stay awake and think, maybe I can stay sober. But I came home and it was a matter of a few hours after my husband had picked me up at the airport. I flew home. Everybody was so proud of me. I remember seeing my son and him saying, I'm so proud of you, mom. And then my husband dropping me off and saying, I'm sure you're just wiped out. And I'm like, yes, I am so tired, which I was. But my husband left and I got in the car and I drove to the liquor store because I knew I wasn't done. And the fact of the matter is I came home and I did not have a plan. I
Mhm.
wanted to quit. I wanted to stay sober, but I didn't know what that looked like. I only knew what that looked like to be on this bike trip sober. I didn't know
Mhm.
what life looked like sober. And I didn't
Mhm.
ask for help.
Mhm.
I could have gotten help right then and there from my husband or from many people.
Mhm.
And all I had to do was ask. But
Mhm.
once again, I took it into my control and in my own strength and turned my back on almost 2 weeks of sobriety and went right back in.
So when you went right back in, but let me ask you this question. You were going to church. Nobody even knew. You thought
Yeah.
that, this was all, okay. So how did you how'd you hide all that?
Well, I, I can't say that I thought it was all okay. I knew it wasn't okay until a certain point. It's there's a saying, it's not a problem until it is. And
Mm,
then when it is, it's too late. The old, you can't turn a butterfly back into a caterpillar. I drank socially for many years, with friends from church, not in a problematic way. And it was a slow ease into addiction
mm,
that I cannot pinpoint exactly why or when, except that I had this feeling that I liked it too much. And I remember asking my husband once, I said, "Do you ever think about," it was like a Wednesday, and I said, "Do you ever think about, like, I can't wait till the weekend and have a drink, because then I would have never thought about having a drink during the week." And he said, "No. Do you?" And I'm like, "Oh, of course not." But I had just started thinking about that, like, maybe I
mhm,
will. And so I got in the habit of having a glass of wine while I was making dinner. And I made it okay by quick pouring him a glass and, taking a drink that he would see. So he would think it was my first drink. So when my breath smelled like it, as I handed him his glass, things like that. But really, I was already 2 drinks in before he got home. This
mhm,
escalated so quickly
mm,
that in a matter of just, I think, about 3 years, I was drinking all the time. And I knew it was not okay, but yet I was functioning. I was working in a Christian not-for-profit pregnancy center. I was a choir leader to our children's choir at church. My husband was an elder at church. I
mm,
was, the football mom. I was everything. I was everything, but I was a fake.
mm.
And that's how I was doing life. And it felt awful. And I didn't know how to do life anymore without alcohol. And
Yeah.
there was a pretty steady, I like to say, a pretty steady IV of it in my system. I lost a lot of time and years and memories, that I will never get back because
Mhm,
of not having that clarity. And so I would sit in church and I would think, I am sure there is no other woman in this church that is doing what I'm doing. And I had so much shame over it, because shouldn't I have known better? I'm a Christian. Shouldn't God take this away? Or shouldn't have I asked God? And then believe me, I asked God a lot to take it away after the fact. But I would ask him and say, just take this away so I can go back to drinking like a normal person, or I'll just drink beer. I hate beer. So maybe that'll work if I just stick to something I don't like, or I'll just drink on the weekends, anything. But
mm,
everything had a condition around it. And
mm.
God doesn't like demands with conditions, as I
No.
would find out. But I didn't know how to fix it. So I just
Yeah.
became a better liar and became better at hiding, because I didn't know what to do and I didn't know who to confess it to.
Mhm. Did your family know?
My husband gradually knew how bad it was towards the last, probably, I'd say, year and a half, 2 years.
Mhm,
It became a push pull. He covered for me a lot because, quite honestly, I heard him say recently in an interview, he said, I didn't know what to do either. I had this desperation that maybe we could fix it. So now we're both holding on to this hope, that he's holding on to this hope to himself. Maybe she is going to get better. Maybe this is the time. And one time I did quit for 6 months, and another time for 9 months,
mhm,
but it didn't last. So he has false hope. He
mhm,
doesn't want the world to know any more than I do. You
mm,
know, um, as a man, he thought it looked like a failure on his part. Why
mhm,
isn't his wife happy?
mhm,
And I never thought about it from that angle at the time. This is years later. It's kind of the two of us. And I had some friends that were very suspicious and confronted me late in, the later years. And if you confronted me and tried to get in between me and my drinking, I really didn't have any use for you anymore.
mhm,
And I just moved on. If I was uncomfortable drinking around you, or you didn't drink, say you were a person that just didn't drink, person like I am now, I didn't like being around you. So
mm.
I moved on. I stayed with the drinking crowd. I'm most familiar with alcoholism, or alcohol use disorder, as it's more commonly called today. It's a very selfish place to be. as well. It's all about you and what makes you happy and what fits what you're doing.
All sounds like sin, right? It sounds
Hmm.
like when people commit sin, they'll continue in the sin and they think that they can hide the sin, or they that the sin will stop, or that they don't want to be around people that aren't doing the same as them, and the list goes on and on. But here
Hmm.
you are, you're standing in the middle of this with your husband and your family, and then all of a sudden you make this decision to go and do this bike trip in your head, where you think, well, if I do the bike trip, this is going to stop me from doing it forever. And, what was your thought there?
As I said, I thought it will get I actually thought it will get everybody off my back. It will show anybody who's just suspicious that I have a drinking problem that I don't,
Yeah.
that I'm fine. There's no way Sherry the alcoholic could do this bike trip.
Hmm.
And my husband has this hope that it's what's going to fix everything. And so do I. So that's why I did it. And then I came home and I fall. And I must be a slow learner because I went on to do three more of those bike trips before I would end my long-term relationship with alcohol. So,
Hmm.
uh, but those summers that I trained, those were, I know what God used to give me a glimpse into sober life. And I would hang on to those. And I wasn't perfect. I did slip. I did have a couple like totally free summers of sobriety. The ones that were that way, they were, I mean, they were freedom and they were much more joyful and good things were happening. But in my heart, I knew I wasn't done.
Hmm.
It's hard to describe, but I had not made that commitment. And like I said, it wasn't going to be a bike trip. That was going to be the deciding factor.
The alcohol, how does it trip you up? Like somebody's listening right now, they might be going through this too. How does it trip you up as a human being?
I meet people, and it's rare, but they're out there, mostly women that I meet that don't drink. And I'm like, why don't you drink? And they're like, my mom was an alcoholic, or there's addiction in my family. I have
Hmm.
no business drinking. And
Hmm.
I'm like, you are one smart lady. There's
Hmm.
addiction in my family, quite a bit of it actually. I had no business drinking. Throughout the years, more when I was younger, people would say, do you ever worry about, having a drinking problem? And I'm like, no. Obviously, I would know if I had a drinking problem, or if I did, I wouldn't drink. And now I look at the idiocy of that comment because when you do realize that it's too late. So my first thing is you should not drink if there's anything in your family about addiction, or if you have an addictive personality, but it will creep up on you the minute you notice that you're thinking about it and you wonder if you're thinking about it too much. I can tell you that you are. Someone asked me, what's something you would tell someone, the best piece of advice about drinking? I said, well, I would tell them not to, because now everything's out that there is no good amount of alcohol to drink. It
Hmm.
causes cancer. So it may not offend you as much as if someone's smoking a cigarette next to you, if they're putting toxic things into their body when they're drinking. And would that have been enough to stop me when I had a drinking problem? No, I could have cared less. But as a healthy person, I don't have any idea why you would pick up a glass of alcohol today, unless you're seeking the buzz. So there's that on top of it. But the biggest one I always say is if you're drinking alone, stop, because there is absolutely no reason to ever have a drink alone. Drinking is supposed to be social, usually should be a one and done thing. If you're, going to be at a cocktail hour or an event or something like that, there is no reason ever to pour a drink alone. And if there is, you need to tell somebody.
That's powerful. Thank you for that statement, because I think it's going to get to someone's heart and mind, and maybe they're going to rethink about how they do this. You know, I
Hmm.
really think that's it. But also the fact that you're through this. How did you rely on God? How did you realize that it wasn't about willpower, but about surrendering to God?
It's totally about surrender. And I thought I had done that so many times. And I really thought that God had turned his back on me. I was at the end of me. I didn't know what to do. There wasn't a rehab that I would go to. I was refusing to go to rehab because A, I didn't know where to go, and B, I figured more people would find out. Even my husband wasn't like really on board with that because same thing. What are we going to tell everybody? A lot of people don't even know about this problem. So when it came to that point, after a particularly very bad binge drinking weekend where I believe it was alcohol poisoning. There was a number of factors that lined up to this moment, and it's chronicled in my book. But it came to a moment of my husband saying to me, here's the thing. If you choose to drink again, ever, you have to go to rehab. And if you say you will not go to rehab, I'm going to leave. And those were two things that I knew were hard for him to say because A, I know he didn't want to send me to rehab. He didn't want to own that. He didn't want to face that either. And I knew he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to do that to our family. And I looked at him and I said, because of what had happened that day, which I want to share, I said, game on. And I said, you should buy a breathalyzer just so you're never ever suspicious because I don't ever want you to question if I'm lying to you. I asked him years later if he ever bought one because he said no. He never had a reason to because I never drank again. Because that day, November 2013, was the day that I spent an entire day just sitting in my living room, just talking to God in a lot of silence, and just at the end saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I found myself on my living room floor at some point, and I don't even know how to say it. I have a hard time. I don't even really put my hands up in church very much. I'm a raised Christian reformed, so I was flat on my face on my living room floor. And I said, God, take it. I surrender this to you. And I felt different. I felt it was ripped from it came out of my gut. I said, I'll do anything you want. I didn't give him the conditions. I didn't give him the way this was going to go. I just was spent. I just laid there and cried. And then I got up and I went over to the kitchen sink, reached underneath it and dug the vodka out from the back. I poured it down the sink. It stunk. I'll never forget how much it stunk to me. It turned my stomach. And I lifted the other hand and I said, hallelujah, it's over. And then I went back in the living room and I sat there and I was like, now what? I don't have a plan, but I wasn't as scared as when I didn't have a plan before. I felt a peace. I have a lot of women ask me, well, you're lucky. You just got it taken away from you. And I said, no, 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 no. It was still hard. God expected me to do the work, but I was trusting that he was going to walk alongside me and he was going to take care of me. Yes, it was hard. Even though, yes, there was cravings. There was times that I say that I wish I could have drank, like the events and things like that, where I would think to myself, I wish I could drink. This sucks. I wish I could drink. I knew that drinking would never be an option again. I would never entertain the thought again. And I never did. And to this day, I have not. And that's a miracle from someone that could not go a day without a water bottle full of vodka in her purse those last few years. That's a miracle. And if God can do it for me when you're ready, if you're ready to give it all, he can do it for you too. He can do that for anybody. And I guess I just wasn't ready before. I had no trust that there was this new way of life waiting for me and that it could be that good because I'm telling you, it's really, really good.
Freedom in Christ.
Absolutely.
Freedom in Christ. Well, Sherry did write this book, Sober Cycle, pedaling through recovery one day at a time. And you can get that full story right in this book. And you can like, there's details and it's an amazing story. And I would love for you to try to get this book. And how did your faith give you strength when everything felt impossible?
My faith gave me strength because that's all I had. I felt like I'd lost everything, even though I still had my family. I mean, I wasn't homeless or anything like that, but I lost everything about who I was. To the outside world, it looked like I had it all, but inside there was nothing left. I didn't do anything for quite a while, and I was used to be Miss Social Everything, and it was just me and God. And I remember that I chose a book off my shelf. It was What on Earth Am I Here For by Rick Warren. And I just did a lot of work out of that book for a couple months, trying to find my place back. And after a while, I was asked to start talking about what had happened. And I was never so scared to talk about something in my life. But I couldn't find women that were in my shoes. I could find a lot of women that weren't talking about their faith and their recovery. But to me, I wanted to talk about Jesus. I wanted to talk about what the Holy Spirit had done in me and my, that's the reason I'm sober. I realize there's some groups that you can talk about it, but I wanted to sit down over a cup of coffee with another woman. Say, did this happen to you? How are you walking with, and I couldn't find her. And I felt God saying, you're going to have to go find him. So I started a ministry called She Surrenders, totally a leap of faith, talk about faith. And I wrote a little blog I hope no one would ever read, and someone read it. And a couple other people did. And I was asked to speak about my story at a church. I did it. And I've never been so scared to do something in my life. And I cried all the way home because I thought it's out. It's out in this community. Everybody's going to know. But when I got home, I had an email from a woman and said, "Me too." She wasn't alone anymore, neither was I. So it was worth it. And from there, the She Surrenders ministry kind of took off, and now there's a community, and it's still going. She Surrenders is a ministry for women of faith and recovery. That's where my faith took me. My faith has brought me to where I am today. My faith is what rebuilt my family and my life. My life is built around recovery. Sometimes we don't think our career path is quite what it's going to be, but God chose that for me, and I'm grateful. There used to be there was a man in one of the AA meetings I went to early on, and I did go to a few AA meetings, and I loved listening to some of the old timers, and he would end with, "And today I'm grateful to be an alcoholic." And in my head, I'm like, "You're a liar." It was before I was sober for the last time too, so I was still kind of actively drinking, and I think to myself, "You're lying. Who is grateful for this? That's crazy." And then later on, I found myself saying, "I'm so grateful. I'm sorry for the hurt that it's caused. Always will be, but I'm beyond grateful because it's made me who I am today."
Yeah.
And I don't like to think about who I was.
You have this ministry and you're talking about it. Let the audience know, like, is it a ministry that, anybody from anywhere could be part of or get help or
Mhm.
information or anything like that?
Yeah, so shesurrenders.com. It's a website. There's a forum on there that you can talk with other women. That's called the Surrender Collective. We have a Monday night meeting called Joyful Surrender. So that's kind of the active part. There's over 250 blogs on there. I haven't blogged recently, but there is a lot of information on there. She Surrenders, and also I do a lot on social media, Facebook, Instagram. She Surrenders. Is the name on Instagram. And I try to just be inspiring and give good advice, and only advice that worked for me. And it's always linked to my faith. A couple of years ago, as I talked about rehab a lot, and that we did not find a rehab that we would have chosen for me. We couldn't find one that was around here or that was faith-based. For me or another family member later on. And there was a day where God put it on both my husband and I's heart that we need to start one. And in the same way that God said to me, "You're going to need to find them," when I was looking for women to talk to. So we said, kind of like, "Okay, well, we're not just going to go out and start building one, but if you show us, we're going to be obedient." And it was a very short matter of time before he did. And this amazing property came up for sale that was just a few miles from our home, actually. And I saw it and I was like, "Oh, there it is. There it is." And that was 2.5 years ago. And so last spring, we opened up Selah House Recovery in Michigan, Western Michigan here, faith-based 30-day residence for women to overcome addiction. This is a Christ-centered recovery. We teach you to fall back in love with what God can do in your life, to release yourself from the shame, to walk new into life and be your authentic self. It's incredible to see It doesn't need to take a couple years like it did me walking alone. And that's my biggest desire is let's do this a lot faster because you have life to live. You have work to do. You have family to be with. And it's just been amazing to watch.
What would you like to leave my audience with today?
My favorite verse, and I discovered it when I was newly sober reading What on Earth Am I Here For? And it was the Message version of Ephesians 3:20, which has some, I can't quote it verbatim, but it says, isn't it wonderful all these things that God has brought you to? It goes on, like there's big things coming, more than you could ever dream about. And later on, I had looked it up and it's, God will do more than you could ever ask or imagine. He restored my marriage. And I thought, this must be it. The more than I could have ever asked or imagined. And then our youngest daughter was the last one to get me. She got married while I was sober. And it was an incredible day. And I was like, this must be it, more than you could ask or imagine. And then my first grandchild was born. I'm like, no, that's it. And then the ministry, and then Selah House. I'm like, it's not going to end. Life is full of more than you could ever ask or imagine. So if you ever wonder if the Bible is truth, I'm going to point you to that verse. And you don't get to pick and choose what's truth in the Bible because the entire Bible is. But that verse is my favorite.
What's one more step you'll take right now to lean on God's grace? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. For more Christ-centered conversations, visit the website, thecallwithNancySabato.com. Until next time, all glory and honor to King Jesus.